All right, everyone, we've got Trump's tax returns. Ain't it exciting? We've got 6 years of Trump's tax returns from 2015 through 2020, the period, of course, leading up to and then into and just past his presidency. And we've got some numbers here, which are being grossly misinterpreted by most of the people that are interested enough to even go through them. To be clear, to use the term nothing burger, and I know that's a cringy, term to use generally, to use the term not only would be accurate, but actually comes up short of showing how little interest there is in this. And we know that there's little interest. Look at the actions, not at the words. Legacy media comes out, reports widely on Trump's taxes. Wow, look, we've actually got the numbers of how much adjusted gross income he made and how many taxes he paid. What happened in less than 24 hours after this was released and the slew of legacy articles came out? Do you see any of them on any of the legacy media sites? No. If there's a mention, it's buried on page 2. Why do you think that? Why do you think they're talking about Zelensky going to meet with Congress and shit like that, which is as boring as fuck as well? It's because the tax returns don't do any damage to Donald. What they were hoping for is not what they got. What they were hoping for is to see Donald Trump made an obscene amount of money and he paid relatively little in taxes. The hope for that isn't because he's skeeving. It isn't because he's cheating on his taxes, although that's what they would insinuate he did in order to try to do political damage to him. No, the reality is that gross income, salaried income, is different from business income. And there's such a thing as business deductions. Of course, when you're running a business, there are expenses that can qualify as a write-off under U.S. tax code. This is a way in which the very, very rich limit their exposure to taxes. This is why the evil corporations don't pay their fair share. It's because of the tax code that was written by multiple incarnations of both Republican and Democrat-incepted Congresses, Senate and House, over the course of half a century. This is how it works. But if you just provide the raw data there, and you don't elaborate further and tell people that, people who don't understand business income and deductions and things like that will speculate that Donald Trump cheated on his taxes. But they didn't get that. And so they did an immediate pivot. Before I go through the actual numbers, their pivot is, well, Trump doesn't make as much money as people say. He's broke. He's actually a loser. Basically, Trump orange man, crying baby, poopy pants, impotent, stupid, Atlantic City casinos. That's what they're going with. They were hoping they'd be able to go with the tax fraud line because that would be, even if it wouldn't be true, at least they could peddle it to people and say, well, it might be legally actionable. We need to look further into this. That's not what they got. They have to take the second place trophy and just say, well, evil Trump is actually not wealthy at all. He's no billionaire. Again, the average person doesn't understand because other than their main primary residence, they don't have anything else in their net worth, maybe a recently bought car, I suppose. They have a home, they have their income, that's their worth. Well, it's basically, so it's their income. Their primary residence, they don't really count it as anything other than they happen to live there. And many people at this point, unfortunately, being forced into smaller and smaller houses or renting or living with relatives anyway, thanks to Bidenomics. These people can't comprehend the concept that a person can be worth billions of dollars, as in they have assets that if they sold them tomorrow, they could pocket billions in cash. They don't understand the difference between that kind of holding, business, residential, whatever, and actual income that's taxable year on year. This is also why when Elizabeth Warren rants and screeches about the evil billionaires that she really wishes that she was one of, to tell the truth, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I genuinely think in her case it's ignorance, and her fans are ignorant too. Let's go through the numbers. In the year 2015, Donald Trump's adjusted gross income was negative $31 million, well, close to 32. Tax based on income and AMT, $2.1 million, but then he got tax credits, so he ended up having to pay over $600,000, despite technically losing several tens of millions of dollars. Well, I don't think that there's tax fraud there, unless you want to dig into what the tax credits were. Adjusted gross income for 2016, again, about negative $32 million. The tax based on income and AMT, about the same. The tax credit's a bit higher, though, so he only paid $750 in taxes, after losing several tens of millions. It's worth noting that when we look at these numbers, they don't tell the whole story, even if you went into the raw data. Because you'll remember when Trump took the presidency, he effectively divested his direct involvement with Trump Incorporated, with his sort of family firm, divesting himself of everything other than getting the basic income statements at the end of the year. So he's not a direct part of it, or at least wasn't until arguably now. I think that technically, I think he's segued back into that role because he's not in any elected office and he's seeking one, but he's not there yet. So for at least a year or two, I think he's back on the prowl. We'll see what is... I'm sure they'll dig into that income statement as well. His kids and a handful of execs are the ones running the show. You'll notice that Jared Kushner secured a $1 billion deal in Saudi Arabia. One that's actually newsworthy. At least the premise, there's something there to chew on. There's more than just a yellowed bones. There's a little bit of scrap of meat left on it. At least that's something that's actually, you can look at it and think that it might be skeevy. Sort of like a Hunter Biden case. One of them people call for investigation, the other one not so much, and they call it a conspiracy theory. 2017, Donald Trump made about negative $13 million. His tax based on income and AMT would be about $7.5 million. He had tax credits covering the entire total and again paid $750. So again, for these years he's not really making anything. Then he had an adjusted gross income of $24 million in 2018. Somehow he made a shit ton of money, almost offsetting the last couple prior years' losses between that and 2019. His tax would have been $9.3 million. He had tax credits totaling $8.3 million and paid about $1 million in taxes. 2019, he made $4.3 million. His tax would have been about $500,000. He had tax credits in the final total $133,000 he paid. In 2020, he lost almost $5 million, but he paid no tax, had no tax credits, and there was no tax bill. Not exactly sure how that happened, but, that's what they're saying. The fact is that this is quite literally a nothing burger. And people's eyes glazed over when they saw it. They said, well, we can't cast him off as a tax cheat. He's paying taxes. He's losing money while doing so. So they pivoted to Trump's the loser. That really didn't take hold, though, because they've been spending the last half decade declaring everything that he's done being loserdom. So nobody's affected by it anymore. So now they've buried the story. Just like they're trying to bury Twittergate, it ain't working so well. The FBI finally having to come out and address the situation, by the way, is evidence that they're very worried about it because they don't really want to weigh in on it and get egg on their face if they don't have to. Generally, you try to ignore things and hope they go away unless they're highly significant. Hint, hint, the FBI weighed in for a goddamn reason. There's a reason why Trump doesn't give a shit about this. He barely even spoke up when they obtained his taxes and decided to release it to the public. He looked at the statements. He said, well, if the American public's going to see that I still got high tax levels even when I lost money. I don't give a fucking shit. By the way, apparently the IRS did take a couple years off from auditing him. Probably because he wasn't making any money. But this is evidence that the IRS did something wrong. It's funny to see the same left that usually loves the IRS and is grateful to Biden for massively expanding the Bureau, all of a sudden condemning them. Well, they audited Obama, they're auditing Biden, they audited Bush, why aren't they auditing Donald Trump? Well, I mean, these other people, they took their presidential salary. That alone already puts them up above the income threshold that Biden wants to automatically audit everyone at, by the way. Supposedly. Of course, that's not actually the point, but that was the selling point. Don't worry, everyone. If you ain't making $400,000 or more a year, I ain't going to audit you. Bullshit, but that was what he claimed. Well, the presidential salary is a bit above that already. And of course, they have other business holdings and shit like that. They have other forms of income. They write a book, they make $10 million fucking dollars minimum, mostly from Chinese sales. Nobody else wants to read their bullshit. Trump decided to divest himself. He didn't decide to peddle the book. He did that before he was the president of the United States. Damn, no shit, he lost money. When he's completely divested from his actual business interests and it's literally just him subsisting effectively on nothing more than siphoning out what he needs from the Trump organization, it looks like he loses a lot of money. Yeah, you think it's because he maintains his private jet? You think it's because he has his limousines, and I do mean plural? He has to pay for the upkeep at the Mar-a-Lago and shit like that? No shit, he's losing money because he has a primary residence that's bigger than the White House by, I think, 2 or 3 times. No shit, it costs a lot of money to maintain that sort of thing. I wonder how. But it's being hyperanalyzed by people that don't understand income versus net worth. They don't understand money versus wealth, in other words. They don't understand how Trump divested himself of his direct business deals, making him look like a loser if you look at his tax statements. Now look at the Trump organization itself. Again, billions and billions of dollars. But he's not directly connected to that for the purposes of this particular tax season that was looked at, which is why they limited the data. You'll notice they didn't go after 2013, 2014. They didn't care about those years, now did they? Would have told a little bit of a different story because it's prior to his divestment in his business and housing empire. That's why they decided to artificially limit the data. They were hoping for a bang, and instead they got a goddamn dud. That's about all. Peace out.